The Alpha CEO kidnapped me for revenge. He didn't expect me to be his true mate. Chapter 1. The world dissolved into a nauseating swirl of darkness and the bitter aftertaste of chloroform. My first conscious sensation was the cold. It seeped through the thin fabric of my clothes, a damp, unforgiving chill that bit into my skin. I was lying on a hard stone floor. My head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that pulsed behind my eyes. The last thing I remembered was the walk home from my late shift at the diner, the shortcut through the warehouse district, and then nothing. A void. I pushed myself up, my limbs heavy and uncooperative. The room was large, cavernous, and sparsely furnished. A single high window let in a sliver of moonlight, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It looked like a cell in a castle that had been modernized just enough to be bleak rather than medieval. There was a heavy wooden door with a new electronic lock. No handle on the inside. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. Kidnapped. The word echoed in my mind, hollow and terrifying. Why? I was nobody. An unmated Omega with no family, no pack, no money. I worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over my head. Who would bother? The click of the electronic lock was deafening in the silence. The door swung open, and he filled the frame. He was immense, not just in height, but in the sheer presence that rolled off him in waves. An alpha, a powerful one. His aura was a physical weight, pressing down on the air, making it hard to breathe. It was cold, sharp, and laced with a fury so potent it felt like the room's temperature dropped another 10 degrees. My Omega instinct screamed at me to submit, to bare my throat, to whimper. I locked my jaw, forcing them down. I would not give him that. He stepped into the light, and I saw him clearly. Alpha male, ink-black tousled hair, dark tailored trousers, tight-fitting black t-shirt, heavy combat boots. He moved with a predator's grace, each step deliberate and silent on his heavy boots. His eyes scanned the room and then landed on me, pinning me to the spot with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. "You're awake." His voice was a low baritone, devoid of warmth. It was a statement, not a question. "Who are you?" My own voice came out as a rasp, but I was proud that it didn't tremble. "Why am I here?" A humorless, cold smile touched his lips. "My name is Alex Thorne, and you are here, Lavender, because of your father." My blood ran cold. My father. He had died 5 years ago, a broken man after his business collapsed. My father is dead. I have nothing to do with whatever you think he did. Think? Alex took another step forward, and I instinctively shuffled back until my shoulders hit the cold stone wall. "I don't think, I know. Your father, Elias Vale, embezzled millions from my company. He sabotaged a merger that would have secured the future of my entire pack. When he was caught, he took the coward's way out and left hundreds of families to suffer the consequences." I stared at him, horror dawning. I knew my father's company had failed. I knew he'd been accused of shady dealings, but I never believed it. He was my dad. He was kind. He read me bedtime stories. The man Alex was describing was a monster. "You're lying," I whispered. "Am I?" He closed the final distance between us, crouching down so his face was level with mine. His scent washed over me, oak moss, frost, and something darker like smoked whiskey. It was the scent of power and control, and it should have terrified me. It did terrify me, but beneath the fear, something else, something deep and primal and utterly unwelcome, stirred. A flicker of recognition. I shoved the feeling away. It was just Omega instinct reacting to a dominant alpha. Nothing more. "He ruined lives," Alex continued, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "He destroyed my father, who worked himself into an early grave trying to salvage what was left. My pack suffered for years because of his greed. And you, his only child, his beloved Omega daughter, you will understand what it means to pay a debt." "So what is this?" I shot back, anger momentarily overriding my fear. "You're going to hold me prisoner in your dungeon? What does that solve? It won't bring the money back. It won't bring your father back." His eyes glinted with a dangerous light. "No, but it will bring me satisfaction. You will live with the consequences he so conveniently escaped. You will serve me. You will clean the floors you once would have walked on as a guest. You will see the wealth and power your father tried to steal, and you will have none of it. This is my revenge." He reached out and I flinched, expecting a blow. but his fingers only brushed against the silver blonde braid that had fallen over my shoulder. Omega female, long silver blonde braid, simple worn gray tunic, soft leggings. His touch was like a brand, searingly hot against my skin. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot up my spine. My breath hitched, his own hand stilled. For a fraction of a second, the cold fury in his expression fractured, replaced by a flicker of pure, unadulterated shock. His nostrils flared, and he stared at his own fingers as if they'd betrayed him. The moment was gone as quickly as it came. His face hardened back into its mask of icy contempt. He snatched his hand back as if burned. "Get some rest," he snarled, standing up and turning away from me. "Your new life begins tomorrow." He left, the door locking with a definitive thud, leaving me alone in the chilling silence. I slumped against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. My mind was reeling from his story, from his threats, from this impossible situation. But one thought echoed louder than all the others, a terrifying, impossible truth that my body had recognized before my mind could catch up. When he touched me, for that one fleeting second, the world had felt right. The cold had vanished. The fear had receded. There had been nothing but a shocking, profound sense of completion, and the look in his eyes. He had felt it too. Alpha CEO Alex Thorne had kidnapped me for revenge. But in that single accidental touch, a new, far more dangerous game had begun. He didn't just have his father's enemy's daughter in his clutches. He had his true mate. Chapter 2. The thin mattress on the steel frame was a special kind of torture, offering the illusion of comfort while providing none. Sleep had been a fleeting, fractured thing, haunted by the scent of oak moss and frost, and the memory of a touch that felt like both a brand and a homecoming. True mate. The words were a madness, a cruel joke the universe was playing. How could a bond so sacred, so fated, be rooted in something as vile as revenge? The electronic lock disengaged with a soft buzz, pulling me from my turbulent thoughts. A different man stood there, younger with a neutral, almost bored beta scent. He carried a tray which he set on the small table near the door. "Breakfast," he said, his tone flat. "You have 30 minutes. Then you start your duties." "Duties?" I asked, my voice still rough from disuse and distress. "The Alpha's orders. You're to assist in the East Wing cleaning detail." He left without another word, the lock re-engaging. The food was simple but good. Eggs, toast, fruit. I ate it all, my survival instincts overriding my nausea. If I was to endure this, I would need my strength. After I ate, I found a simple set of soft leggings and a gray tunic, laid out on the foot of the bed, plainer than the clothes I'd been taken in. A prisoner's uniform. I changed, the coarse fabric a constant reminder of my new status. Precisely 30 minutes later, the beta returned. "This way." He led me out of my cell and through a labyrinth of corridors. The Thorne estate wasn't just a house. It was a fortress of modern luxury and old-world power. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased sprawling, manicured grounds, while the walls were adorned with stark, expensive-looking art and trophies from hunts. The air hummed with the presence of a large, prosperous pack. It was everything Alex had said. The wealth my father was accused of trying to destroy. I was handed over to a stern-looking older beta woman named Clara, who oversaw the household staff. Her eyes held no malice, only a weary resignation. She didn't ask questions. She simply handed me a bucket, a mop, and a rag. "You will dust every surface, then wash the floors in this hallway. When you are finished, you will report back to me. Do not speak to anyone. Do not wander." The work was menial and backbreaking. I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing at the intricate patterns of the marble floor, the sharp floral scent of the cleaning products stinging my nose. It was a deliberate humiliation, and it was working. Hot tears of frustration pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them away furiously. I would not let him see me break. It was there, with my hands submerged in soapy water, that his scent hit me again. Stronger this time, without the barrier of a closed door. My head snapped up. He was standing at the end of the hallway, observing me. Alpha male, ink-black tousled hair, dark-tailored trousers, tight-fitting black t-shirt, heavy combat boots. He wasn't alone. A sleek, beautiful woman in a sharp pantsuit was with him, her arm linked possessively through his. An alpha female, her scent all jasmine and sharp ambition. She was looking at a tablet, pointing something out, but his gaze was fixed on me, a cold, assessing look in his eyes. The pull was instantaneous and violent. My omega core clenched, a desperate, aching need unfurling inside me. It wanted to go to him. It wanted to press against that solid chest and breathe in his scent until it was the only thing left in the world. I gripped the mop handle until my knuckles turned white, anchoring myself. The woman followed his gaze, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows drawing together in a frown. "Who is that, Alex? New staff? She smells weak." Her words were a dart, meant to wound, and they did, but not in the way she intended. They ignited a spark of defiance. Alex's expression didn't change. "She is paying off a debt. Nothing for you to concern yourself with, Isabella." Isabella. The name sounded familiar. A daughter from a powerful allied pack, the papers had hinted at a merger. Of course. The Alpha CEO would have a suitable mate lined up. He began to walk towards me, Isabella trailing slightly behind, her heels clicking imperiously on the marble I had just cleaned. I forced myself to look down, to focus on the suds in my bucket. His boots stopped inches from my kneeling form. "Is the work to your liking, Lavender?" The mockery in his tone was a lash. I lifted my head, meeting his gaze. The moment our eyes connected, that same electric jolt from the dungeon arced between us. I saw his jaw tighten, a barely perceptible tick. He felt it too, every single time. "It's enlightening," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I never knew revenge could be so spotless." A flicker of something dangerous, not anger but intrigue, crossed his face. Isabella let out a short, dismissive laugh. "She has a mouth on her. You should teach her some manners, Alex." "She'll learn," he said, his voice dropping, his eyes still locked on mine. "Won't you, Lavender? You'll learn your place." He was talking about more than cleaning floors. He was talking about the bond, this inconvenient, impossible pull. He was telling me to fight it, to reject it, just as he was. He took a step, and the toe of his heavy combat boot deliberately scuffed the wet, freshly mopped section of the floor, leaving a dark smear. "You missed a spot." Then he walked away, Isabella casting a final, contemptuous glance over her shoulder. I stayed on my knees, trembling not with fear, but with a raw, simmering fury. The heat of it was a welcome change from the cold despair. He wanted a war. He wanted a game of push and pull. Fine. But he was playing with a force even he, a powerful alpha, couldn't fully control. He had kidnapped me for revenge. He thought he held all the power. He didn't understand that the true mate bond was a two-way street, and I could feel it already, a tiny hairline fracture in the ice of his resolve. My mere presence was a torment to him, a constant living reminder that his perfectly planned vengeance had just gotten infinitely more complicated. Chapter 3. The days bled into a grim routine. Wake up in the cold room, eat, clean. The humiliation was a constant low-grade fever. But the work also gave me a perverse kind of strength. My muscles ached, my hands grew rough, but I was not broken. I was learning the geography of my prison, the rhythms of the pack, and the cracks in my captor's armor. The crack's name was the bond. It wasn't a choice. It was a biological imperative, a silent, screaming need that grew with every passing hour. His scent, that intoxicating blend of oak moss and frost, was everywhere. It lingered in the halls he walked. It clung to the furniture in his study that I was forced to dust. It was a ghost in the air that tormented me. My body was a traitor, humming in his presence, going cold and listless in his absence. The worst were the fleeting, accidental touches. When I was scrubbing the floor of his private office and he brushed past me to get to his desk, the sleeve of his shirt grazing my arm. A spark, a jolt of pure, undiluted lightning that made us both freeze for a single suspended second before he would snarl at me to get back to work. He was fighting it just as hard as I was, his fury at the bond a tangible force. One evening, a week into my captivity, Clara ordered me to take a tray of food to the Alpha's study. It was a test, I knew. A new layer of torment. I found him standing by the massive floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, silhouetted against the twilight. The room was a reflection of him, all dark wood, sleek metal, and power. It smelled intensely of him, and my knees felt weak. "Your dinner, Alpha," I said, my voice carefully neutral. He didn't turn. "Set it on the desk." I did as I was told, the fine china clinking softly. I turned to leave, desperate to escape the suffocating intimacy of the room. Stay. The single word was a command, laced with alpha power that made the air thick. I stopped, my back to him. "Look at me." I turned slowly. He had finally faced me. The fading light carved out the sharp planes of his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw. He looked tired. The perpetual mask of cold fury was still there, but it was frayed at the edges. He was studying me, his gaze a physical weight. "You're thinner," he stated, as if noting a flaw in one of his assets. "Prison food and hard labor will do that," I replied, unable to keep the bite from my voice. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Do not mistake basic hospitality for comfort. You are here to atone, not to be coddled." Atonement? I took a step forward, the defiance he seemed to hate so much rising up like a shield. "How does me scrubbing your floors atone for crimes I didn't commit? Do you feel better? Does the ghost of my father tremble when you see me on my hands and knees?" His eyes flashed, a storm brewing in their depths. He set his glass down with a sharp thud and closed the distance between us in 3 long strides. The air crackled, the mate bond screaming in the small space between our bodies. "You have his defiance," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "His arrogance. You think you're innocent. You lived in the house his blood money built. You wore the clothes it bought. You are the living, breathing legacy of his betrayal." "I was a child," I shouted, my control snapping. "And I lost everything when he died. Everything. I have nothing left of that life. All I have are the debts you say he left behind. So what more do you want from me, Alex? What will finally satisfy your revenge?" He was so close now I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His scent was overwhelming, a heady, maddening drug. My heart was hammering, my breath coming in short gasps. It wasn't just anger. It was the bond, pulling us together, a magnetic force we were both desperately fighting. His hand came up, not to strike me, but to hover near my cheek. His fingers trembled slightly. "I want you to understand," he said, his voice ragged, stripped of its usual icy control. "I want you to feel a fraction of the helplessness my pack felt. I want you to look at me and see the consequences of your bloodline. I see a man who is so consumed by the past that he's willing to destroy his own future," I whispered, the truth of the words hanging between us. The air shifted. The anger seemed to drain from him, replaced by a raw, conflicted hunger. His gaze dropped to my lips. This was different. This wasn't an accidental brush. This was a conscious, deliberate step into the fire. The space between us evaporated. His body was inches from mine, a solid wall of heat and muscle. My back was to his desk, and he caged me in, his hands flat on the wood on either side of me. His head dipped, his lips so close to my neck, to my scent gland, that I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin. A violent shudder racked my body. A soft, involuntary whimper escaped my throat. It was the most submissive sound I had ever made, and it was pure, unadulterated Omega instinct. My eyes fluttered closed. Every cell in my body was screaming for him to close the distance, to bite, to claim, to end this agonizing tension. I felt the sharp intake of his breath. He was drowning in my scent, in the pheromones I was pouring into the air. A siren's call meant only for him. His lips ghosted over my pulse point, and for one heart-stopping moment, I thought he would do it. I thought he would surrender. But then, with a guttural sound of self-loathing, he wrenched himself away. He stumbled back as if I had struck him, his chest heaving. His expression was one of pure horror, horror at himself, at his loss of control, at the power I held over him without even trying. "Get out," he rasped, his voice raw. He wouldn't look at me. "Get out now." I didn't need to be told twice. I fled, my legs unsteady, the ghost of his breath still burning on my skin. I ran back to the cold solitude of my room, my body alight with a desperate, aching need. He had brought me here to break me. But in that heated, breathless moment in his study, I had seen the truth. The person he was truly trying to break was himself. And for the first time, I felt a sliver of something other than fear or anger towards Alpha Alex. I felt a dangerous, burgeoning sense of power. Chapter 4. The study incident became a fissure in the foundation of my world. The cold, vengeful Alpha was a persona, a fortress I could rage against. The man who had almost buried his face in my neck, whose control had frayed to a single, trembling thread. He was something else entirely, something far more dangerous. He avoided me for 2 days. My cleaning duties were reassigned to the less frequented West Wing. My meals were delivered with even more silent efficiency. It was a tactical retreat, and it screamed of his weakness more than any confrontation ever could. The balance of power had shifted, infinitesimally but irrevocably. He was not just my captor. He was a man at war with his own nature. On the 3rd day, the storm broke, literally. A sudden violent squall lashed against the estate, whipping rain in horizontal sheets against the windows. The power flickered, died, and then emergency generators hummed to life, casting the halls in a dim utilitarian glow. I was in a parlor dusting when Clara found me. "The Alpha requires you in the main hall," she said, her usual stoicism replaced by a flicker of unease. "Now." A cold dread, different from the fear of his presence, trickled down my spine. What now? Had he decided to escalate his revenge? I followed her through the shadowy corridors to the grand 2-story entrance hall. It was chaos. A pack meeting had clearly been interrupted. Dozens of wolves, both in human form, were gathered, their voices a low, anxious rumble. And at the center of it all was Alex. Alpha male, ink-black tousled hair, dark-tailored trousers, tight-fitting black t-shirt, heavy combat boots. He was barking orders, his voice cutting through the din with effortless authority. "Secure the southern perimeter. Beta team, I want a damage report from the garages. Now." His eyes scanned the crowd, and for a fleeting second, they locked with mine. There was no anger in them, no heat, only a grim, focused intensity. He wasn't looking at his prisoner. He was looking at an asset. "Lavender," he commanded, pointing towards a huddled group near the grand staircase. "With them." The group consisted of the pack's elderly and several very young, frightened children. Their Omegan and elderly Beta scents were thick with fear. A little girl with pigtails was crying silently, her small shoulders shaking. Understanding dawned. The storm had damaged part of the estate. There was a potential threat, and in a crisis, an Alpha's first and only instinct was to protect the most vulnerable. His personal vendetta had been instantly shelved in the face of his pack's need. "The lower levels are flooding," a man reported to Alex, his voice tense. "The emergency shelter in the East Wing is compromised. We need to move everyone to the North Wing, but the main corridor is blocked by a fallen beam." Alex's gaze swept the room again, calculating, before landing back on me. You know the layout of the East Wing. Is there another way? A service corridor? Anything, he was asking me. Not ordering, not threatening. Asking. The sheer normality of it was disorienting. I pushed down my shock and forced my mind to work, picturing the routes I'd scrubbed and dusted. "There's a passage," I said, my voice clearer than I expected. "Behind a paneled wall near the linen storage. It leads to the old wine cellar, which connects to the North Wing." A flicker of relief crossed his features. "Show us." For the next hour, I was no longer a prisoner. I was a guide. I led the group of vulnerable pack members through the narrow, dusty passage I'd discovered while cleaning, my hand holding the little girls. Alex was a constant, powerful presence at the rear, his mere existence a bulwark against the panic. He carried an elderly man on his back when the passage grew too steep, his voice a steady, reassuring rumble. In the secure North Wing shelter, surrounded by the grateful murmurs of the pack, the reality of the situation settled over me. This was his true self. The CEO, the vengeful son, they were layers he wore. This, the protector, The unwavering center of his pack's universe was his core. Once everyone was settled and safe, he turned to me. We were in a quiet corner of the shelter, away from the others. The dim light softened the harsh lines of his face. The scent of rain, damp earth, and his own potent oak moss filled the small space. "You kept your head," he said, his voice low. It wasn't praise. It was an observation, laced with a reluctant respect. "You asked for my help," I replied simply, my arms wrapped around myself. He was silent for a long moment, just looking at me. The anger was gone. The coldness had thawed. What was left was a profound, weary confusion. "I brought you here to make you suffer," he said, almost to himself. "Yet tonight, you acted with the loyalty of a pack member." "Protecting children isn't about loyalty," I said, meeting his gaze. "It's about being human." The word human seemed to strike a chord. In the Omegaverse, we were so often defined by our dynamics: alpha, omega, beta. But beneath it all, we were just people. His eyes searched mine, and for the first time, I saw no monster reflected in them. I saw a man haunted by a past he couldn't release, confronted by a future he never wanted but couldn't deny. "My father," he began, then stopped, shaking his head. "The things I believed, the facts." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The doubt was there, a seed planted by my defiance, watered by my actions tonight, now breaking through the hardened soil of his conviction. He reached out, slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. His fingers, once so cruel when they touched my braid, now gently brushed a smudge of dust from my cheek. The contact was electric, but it was different. It wasn't a jolt of conflict. It was a current of connection, deep, resonant, and terrifyingly real. "Lavender," he whispered, my name a prayer and a curse on his lips. In that moment, surrounded by the evidence of his true nature, feeling the undeniable truth of the bond in his tender touch, my hatred for him crumbled into dust. I didn't forgive him. I couldn't, but I finally saw him, and the terrifying, inescapable truth was that the man I saw was my fated mate. Chapter 5. The silence in the shelter was a living thing, thick with the scent of wet wool, fear, and the unspoken thing that now screamed between us. His touch on my cheek was a brand, but it no longer burned with malice. It seared with a terrifying, undeniable truth. The pad of his thumb lingered for a heartbeat too long before he pulled his hand back as if from an open flame. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just looked at me, his stormy gaze holding mine captive, the walls around his emotions visibly crumbling. Then, with a curt nod that was more for himself than for me, he turned and strode back into the heart of the shelter, his alpha presence immediately commanding order and dispensing calm. I stood frozen, the ghost of his touch tingling on my skin. The little girl I had helped earlier toddled over and wrapped her small arms around my legs, burying her face in my tunic. An instinct I didn't know I possessed surged forth, a soothing maternal calm that settled over both of us. I placed a hand on her head, my eyes still fixed on Alex's broad back across the room. He was a paradox. The vengeful kidnapper and the protective alpha. The man who wanted to break me, and the man whose control shattered at the mere whisper of our bond. Which one was real? The storm raged through the night. I stayed with the children, telling them soft stories until they fell into an uneasy sleep. Alex was a constant pacing perimeter, checking on everyone, his energy a relentless protective force. Our eyes met across the room more than once. There was no more coldness, only a heavy, weighted intensity, a silent conversation of confusion and acknowledgement. By morning, the storm had passed. The pack began to disperse, returning to assess damages. The spell was broken, but the world had irrevocably shifted. Later that day, I was summoned not to a cleaning detail, but to his study. The door was open. He stood by the repaired window, the morning light washing over him. The room still smelled powerfully of him, but the memory it evoked was no longer one of fear, but of that charged, breathless moment against his desk. "Sit," he said, his voice low. He didn't turn around. I sat in the leather chair facing his desk, my posture rigid. "I've had my people looking into your father's affairs again," he stated to the window. deeper this time. Beyond the corporate records. My breath hitched. Why? Finally he turned. The tiredness was still there, but it was edged with something new. A grim, unsettling clarity. Because a true mate cannot lie to her alpha. Not in her scent, not in her spirit. And everything you are contradicts everything I thought I knew. He walked to his desk and picked up a single faded photograph. He slid it across the polished wood towards me. It was a picture of my father, younger, smiling, his arm around another man who shared Alex's strong jaw and dark eyes. His father. They looked like brothers. My father never spoke of yours with hatred, only with a grief I was too young and too angry to understand. Alex's voice was rough. I built my entire life on a foundation of rage towards a ghost. I think I may have been wrong. The admission cost him. I could see the struggle in the tight line of his shoulders, the clench of his jaw, the mighty alpha admitting fallibility. Wrong about what? I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. The embezzlement. The sabotage. The initial evidence was compelling, but it was also convenient. I'm beginning to believe your father was a scapegoat, Lavender, set up by others in the company to take the fall. The world tilted. All these years of struggle, of shame, of believing in my father's innocence against all odds. And my captor was the one confirming it. The irony was a physical blow. Who? The word was a ragged plea. I don't know yet, but I will. His gaze met mine, and it was no longer the look of a captor to a prisoner. It was the look of a man seeking absolution from the one person he had wronged the most. I took you, threatened you, humiliated you, for a crime that never was. The air left my lungs. The last vestiges of my anger, the sturdy shield I had clung to, dissolved into a vast, aching sorrow. We were both victims of the same lie. He came around the desk and knelt before my chair, putting us at eye level. The submission of the gesture was staggering. Lavender, he said, my name a raw wound on his lips. I have no right to ask anything of you, but I am asking you. Stay. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. Stay, he repeated, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. Not as a prisoner, but as my guest. Let me uncover the truth. Let me make this right. He was so close. The bond was a live wire, humming with need and a devastating newfound vulnerability. I could see the self-loathing in his eyes, the regret, but also a desperate, burgeoning hope. He had kidnapped me for revenge. He was now asking me to stay for redemption, and my traitorous heart, which had already seen the protector beneath the tyrant, was perilously close to saying yes. Chapter 6. The word stay hung in the air between us, fragile as glass. My entire being was a war zone. The logical part, the part that had been kidnapped and humiliated, screamed to run, to spit his offer back in his face. But the other part, the Omega, the woman who had seen the ghost of a good man beneath his rage, the one tied to him by an invisible, unbreakable string, whispered something else. He was still on his knees. The most powerful man I had ever known, brought low by the truth. I saw the pulse hammering in his throat, the raw, unchecked hope in his eyes. He was laying himself bare, and the vulnerability was more disarming than any show of force. As your guest? My voice was a whisper, scraping past the tightness in my own throat. What does that even mean? It means your room will be unlocked, he said, his gaze unwavering. It means you can go anywhere on the estate grounds. It means you will have whatever you want. Clothes, books, freedom. He swallowed hard. It means I will not touch you without your permission. But it also means you will let me protect you while I find the ones who truly destroyed our fathers. Our fathers. The phrase was a seismic shift. He was no longer positioning us on opposite sides of a war. He was placing us together, against a common enemy. I looked at his hand, so close to mine on the leather armrest. I remembered the heat of his body caging me against this very desk, the whisper of his breath on my neck. The memory should have terrified me. Now, it sent a different kind of heat coiling low in my belly. A treacherous wanting heat. Why? I asked, needing to hear him say it. Why do you want me to stay? Is it just for the investigation, or is it the bond? A muscle feathered in his jaw. He wouldn't or couldn't lie. The bond is a fact. It is a complication I cannot ignore. But this... He gestured between us, at the space crackling with unsaid things. This is not just the bond, Lavender. It's you. Your defiance, your strength in the storm, the way you looked at me when you thought I was a monster, and the way you look at me now. It's shredding me. His honesty was a weapon I had no defense against. He was acknowledging the pull, the madness, the undeniable chemistry that had been there since the first moment in the dungeon, buried under layers of hatred and misunderstanding. I made my decision. Not with my mind, but with that primal Omega core that had recognized its mate despite all reason. Slowly, hesitantly, I lifted my hand and placed it over his. The effect was instantaneous. A sharp, shocked inhale. His fingers trembled beneath mine before turning, his calloused palm meeting my softer one, his fingers lacing through mine. The connection was electric, a circuit completing, a profound rightness that silenced every doubt. A low, involuntary growl of pure satisfaction rumbled in his chest. It wasn't threatening. It was possessive, reverent. "I'll stay," I whispered. The breath he released was a shudder of pure relief. His other hand came up to cradle my cheek, his thumb stroking my skin with a tenderness that made my eyes sting. He leaned forward slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, his eyes asking a silent question. I didn't move. His lips met mine. It wasn't a kiss of passion, not yet. It was a seal, a promise, an apology. It was soft and searching, a tentative exploration of this new, terrifying territory between us. His taste was of oak moss and frost and a hint of the whiskey he'd drunk, and it was the most intoxicating thing I had ever known. My free hand came up to clutch at the fabric of his black t-shirt, anchoring myself as the world tilted on its axis. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, our breaths mingling. "I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you," he vowed, his voice a raw, husky whisper against my lips. The vengeful alpha was gone. In his place was my fated mate, and the war between us was over, replaced by a far more dangerous game, the terrifying, exhilarating journey of surrender. Chapter 7. The weeks that followed were a study in surreal contrasts. The locked door was gone, replaced by an open one that led to a suite of rooms far grander than my old cell, a sitting room, a bathroom, and a bedroom with a window that overlooked the gardens. True to his word, Alex had new clothes brought in. I now wore soft cashmere sweaters, tailored trousers, and elegant dresses, a far cry from the rough gray tunic. They were beautiful, but they felt like a costume for a role I wasn't sure how to play. The estate was no longer my prison, but a gilded cage of uncertainty. Alex was a man transformed, yet the shadow of our beginning loomed large. He was meticulously courteous, fiercely protective, and poured all his considerable resources into the investigation. We ate dinners together in silence that was no longer hostile, but thick with unspoken words and the constant humming awareness of the bond. The physical distance he maintained was a torture in itself. After the searing honesty of that kiss, he had withdrawn, adhering strictly to his promise not to touch me without permission. Every accidental brush in the hallway, every time his scent would wrap around me, was a fresh agony. The bond, now acknowledged, was a live wire demanding completion. The breaking point came on a cold, clear night. I was in the library, unable to sleep, tracing the spines of leather-bound books I felt no right to read. The door opened and Alex stood there. He looked ravaged. His tie was loose, his ink-black hair was a mess, and his eyes held a wild, desperate light I'd never seen before. "It's done," he said, his voice gravelly. "The investigation. We have them, the board members who framed your father. The evidence is irrefutable." Relief, so profound it made my knees weak, washed over me. Vindication, for my father, for me. "So it's over." "No." He took a step into the room, the air crackling around him. "It's not over. Nothing is over." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture one of pure torment. "Do you have any idea what it's doing to me? Having you here, smelling your scent everywhere, knowing you're under my protection but out of my reach? I'm going mad, Lavender." This was the alpha, the raw, primal force beneath the CEO, stripped bare. It was terrifying and exhilarating. "You promised not to touch me," I whispered, my own control fraying. I know what I promised, he growled, the sound echoing in the quiet library. He stopped a few feet from me, his chest heaving. But this bond, it's not a suggestion. It's a command. My wolf recognizes its mate. It needs you. I need you. The heat in his words was a physical force. The careful civility of the past weeks shattered, leaving only the truth of what we were. A fated alpha and omega, circling each other, desperate to claim and be claimed. Then stop fighting it, I heard myself say. It was all the permission he needed. In 2 strides, he was before me. His hands came up to frame my face, his touch not tentative but possessive, sure. You are mine, he breathed, his voice a low, possessive rumble that vibrated through my very bones. You have been since the moment I touched you in that dungeon. And then his mouth was on mine. This kiss was nothing like the first. It was not soft or questioning. It was a conflagration. It was all the pent-up rage, the confusion, the longing, and the undeniable truth exploding between us. It was hard and demanding, acclaiming. His tongue swept into my mouth, and I met him with equal fervor, my hands tangling in his tousled hair, pulling him closer. The world narrowed to the taste of him, the feel of his hard body against mine, the scent of oak moss and frost and pure, unadulterated male enveloping me. He broke the kiss only to trail his lips down my jaw, to my throat, to my scent gland. He nuzzled there, breathing me in, a deep, shuddering growl of pure, primal satisfaction rumbling from his chest. Mine, he whispered against my skin, his voice thick with emotion. Yours, I gasped, the word a surrender and a triumph. He swept me into his arms, carrying me from the library, through the silent halls, to his rooms, the Alpha's chambers. He laid me down on his vast bed, following me down, his weight a welcome anchor. The heated scenes that followed were not explicit, but they were intensely intimate, a symphony of whispered confessions, of clothes slowly discarded, of hands mapping skin as if memorizing a sacred text. It was the final surrender, the sealing of a bond that revenge had tried and failed to corrupt. It was not just bodies joining, but 2 shattered souls forged in fire and betrayal, finally finding their way home in each other. Later, as dawn painted the sky, I lay curled against his side, his arm a heavy protective band around me, his fingers gently tracing the mark his teeth had left on my shoulder. Not a full claiming bite, but a promise of one. A promise of a future. He had kidnapped me for revenge. He had found his true mate instead. And in the wreckage of his failed vengeance, we had built the foundation for a love that was all the stronger for the hell it had been born in.
If you need more dramatic stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your next Omegaverse love story is coming soon.